Doctors and nurses of Reddit, have you ever witnessed a couple have a child that was obviously not the father's? If so, what happened? I worked labor and delivery. Had a very young mother come in, accompanied by her parents. She was just 12 to 13 years old and parents looked stuffy and kept telling her she should have had an abortion, she was too young, etc. Her mother was silent the whole time, but leaked tears for her constantly. While she labored, I received a call from a very young boy who said he was her boyfriend. His trembly voice, that her father wouldn't come to the hospital. I explained that I couldn't give out information, but he could talk to her afterward. I went in, told her he had called, and she showed me a picture of him. He was white, straight red hair, pimply and tiny, the runt of the litter. About an hour later, her physical ed teacher stopped by to check on her, which I thought was odd. We didn't get many teachers checking on students. He was as opposite of the boyfriend as he could get. Tall, very muscular, beautiful smile, and rich, chocolate brown skin. The girl's father accompanied her to the delivery room. Odd, but okay. The more she pushed, the louder she cried. In between, she kept say sorry daddy. Finally, out slid a very beautiful, chocolate brown baby boy. I thought her father was going to pass the fuck out on my delivery room floor. I did my usual "it's a boy" and said nothing else. I handed him off to a nursery nurse and got dad a chair. The new mom said "I'm sorry daddy" over and over again. Her mom, now frowned up, came to see the baby, took one look, started asking God for forgiveness, and left. I sent her dad home a short bit later, admonishing him to react at home, not here. I set up a time for our counselor to meet with him before I left. After talking to new mom, she admitted her gym teacher had been giving her special treatment. I explained sex to her, and she said she'd only kissed the BFF, but had stayed after school to be with her gym teacher. I'm state mandated to report child abuse, so I did. 2 weeks later, with her world shattered, her baby was given up for adoption. I wish her the best. Of note, this was 1989. My husband and I were visiting our friends who just had a baby. We are the godparents, and we were standing in the hallway talking to both sets of grandparents. Well, apparently the hospital has a rule that only 5 visitors may be present in the hallway, but the security guard had let all 6 of us in for some reason and we didn't realize it. This nasty nurse comes up to us, notes that there are 6 of us, tells us someone will have to leave immediately, and then turns to my husband and says, "Oh, are you the daddy?" Without missing a beat, he says, "That's what we are all trying to figure out here." She gets a look of horror on her face and backs away. Worked in the army hospital on Fort Lewis. A woman came in for belly pain, and we found out and told her she was 10 weeks pregnant. The husband at the bedside started laughing, grabbed his coat, and left the room explaining to us that he had been in Afghanistan until 3 weeks prior. He looked back at her and just said, "Well, that's that, Brittany." I always liked how classily he left her, while she just silently stared off into space. I had a vasectomy. While chatting with the doctor, he told me about another patient. This guy had 3 kids, and came in for the snip because he and his wife decided they were done having children. The doc opened up his sack, and found nothing to snip. This guy was born without the ability to have any children. The poor doctor had to explain to him what happened. Imagine finding that out that way. One of my favorite cousins just did 23andMe with her dad and discovered that they were not biologically related at all. This is especially horrible because my aunt, her mother, is one of the most ridiculously zealous and judgmental people I have ever met. She screams at the baby cousins when they don't behave perfectly. She literally threw a pocket Bible at a woman in a grocery store after the woman was on the phone and said shit or something, and she likes to send me unsolicited long letters about God's plan for my life. Surprisingly, her husband is the most fun and laid back person I've ever met. He did not deserve this, or her. Not in the hospital, but a friend and his GF were on again/off again, and she got pregnant. She swears it's his. He wants a paternity test. He moves in with her and her mom. She has the baby. Take the test. Test is taking a while to come back. Him and his family are over the moon with the baby. Kinda forget about it. Mentions it to GF's mom one day and she says, "Oh yeah, she didn't tell you? Came back a while ago. Totally your baby." Awesome. All is well. A few months later they're moving out, and he finds the test in a box. Not his baby. ETA he left, tried to stay in the baby's life, but she wouldn't let him. Oh man, I'm so late to this thread. I used to work in the newborn nursery at a hospital. We got the babies right from delivery, cleaned them up, footprinted them, checked vitals, etc. Dads usually came in with the newborns. This dad comes in with this baby. Dad is white, mom is white, baby is very obviously not white. The dad was very quiet standing next to this baby, watching us clean it up. He says quietly, "I don't think this is my baby." You could tell he was absolutely devastated. We advised him not to sign the birth certificate until he was sure. Not sure what happened after we sent the baby back out to mom, but I felt awful for the guy. My best friend was dating a girl and knocked her up. They got engaged and planned to get married right after the baby was born. There were about 10 of us in the waiting room waiting for her to crank out the baby. It was essentially her parents. His were in another state, some of her friends, and some of ours. After sitting there for about 2 hours, he walks out with a smirk on his face and says, "Let's go." We all thought something horrible had happened. Her friends ask how the baby is, and he said fine, but black. He motioned for us to go, so we followed him. In the parking garage, he tells us to follow him to his apartment, then sends me a text asking I could put him up for a while. We literally moved him out of his apartment and into my spare bedroom in like an hour tops. Her parents didn't know who to be mad at. The confusion on their faces when he told them the baby was black was priceless. I was blood typing a newborn once. Mom was an O+, baby was AB+, which is more or less not possible. I immediately panicked because Jesus God they mixed up the babies. Someone has the wrong baby. We are gonna get sued. They are gonna have to genetic test the entire nursery. What if they subpoena me for being the idiot who discovered the problem? I don't have insurance. What if they sue me? After repeating the test 3 times I called the floor and told them that they'd either drawn the wrong baby's blood or they'd switched babies because mom couldn't be the baby's mother. Lol no, it was a donor egg. The red row matched fine. Everyone was where they were supposed to be. Oh god my heart, though. I used to work with a guy whose wife was pregnant. Near time for delivery everyone at our place of business had a big party with gifts, money, etc. So big day comes, water breaks, they get in car to go to hospital. She breaks the news on the way there it's not his, the kid is another race, and if he could just drop her off at the hospital and then leave, that would be great. He took a few days off work, found a new apartment, moved out, filed divorce etc. He called into work and told someone what happened. News spread pretty fast. All congratulations cards, etc. were cleaned up and thrown away. Everyone was very sensitive to his pain. Except, somehow, I don't know how, I did not get the news. So on his first day back, I walked into the office he shared with 6 to 7 other guys and said, hey daddy-o, how's fatherhood so far? Getting any sleep? Got some pictures? Let's see the little tyke. He slowly lifted his head to look at me with a painful look. The room was dead silent. One of his workmates stood up, grabbed my arm, and walked me out of the room, shushing me. What happened? I asked. Did it die? What's the problem? When he told me I about died myself, I still feel bad for the dude and it's been 30 years. Her co-worker's aunt just found out her dad wasn't actually her dad. So she was really big into genealogy and had mapped out her family tree as far as she could go. She took one of those ancestry DNA tests about 2 months ago and her father's side didn't line up with what she was expecting. In fact, she didn't recognize a single name that she was matched with paternally. She casually asked her dad if he knew any of the names, and he recognized the surname of the maintenance man at the apartment complex where he and his wife, aunt's mom, lived shortly after they had gotten married. Claimed he was a lousy repairman who always flirted with his wife, etc. Aunt's mom had passed away a few years ago, so she decided to not tell her dad the news. Had a lesbian couple come in. One of them was pregnant, neither knew. Judging from all the screaming, this information was poorly received. Nurse here. Once had a couple come in, just them. The father was black and the mother was white. The father was so involved, so ecstatic about him becoming a father for the second time with this woman. Nothing really seemed off until she started pushing. The baby girl came out completely white, blonde hair and blue eyes. Usually black babies come out a little pale, but this was just straight out white. We had to escort the father out for fear of him becoming violent, but he just sat outside the room, on the ground with his face in his hands. That was one of the saddest moments I think I've ever seen with a father, besides stillbirth. Odd thing after though, the mom didn't want the baby and wanted nothing to do with the father, probably out of guilt. So she left the responsibility of this baby and their other 2-year-old boy to this man, who didn't even question taking on this child. My brother was doing his OB-GYN rotation. His story is that in the first birth he assisted the woman, had her husband leave the room. Seems odd these days, but he had the husband step out for the comfort of the patient. The baby is delivered, and the color was not even close. Lily white parents and very black baby. She wants him to stay to talk to her husband who is about to come back, and he bails on the whole situation. She was playing the odds all the way to the end. Had a college buddy whose fiancée was pregnant. They were the perfect couple, both had just over a year with great careers starting out. Everything was butterflies and rainbows. Fast forward to the delivery room, there and out comes a very black baby. He's quite the pale redhead, and she's a blonde/blue eyes Texas girl. He made sure everyone was okay, waited for her parents to arrive, and left without saying a word. He moved all his stuff out of the house while she was in the hospital and cut off all communications with her. Just walked out of their lives in the most stone cold act I'd ever seen. They were together for 9 years, and he just left cold turkey. She tried to contact him at his job a few times, but he quickly moved up the ladder and eventually got a job in another city. He told me once that he took solace in the fact that her family had already dropped about 10k in a wedding that never happened. My sister got pregnant in high school and later met her now husband when she was 5 months pregnant. She is white and boyfriend is black. The baby daddy was white and not present. I was with our entire family, including my now brother-in-law, visiting the baby. My sister was still in recovery from her C-section. Brother-in-law picks up my niece. The nurse looks at him and says she should docken up in a few days. We all had a laugh. We knew he wasn't the father, but she didn't. I always wondered if she felt bad, assumed adultery. They have 2 more girls together, and he was able to adopt a 3 years later. I worked as a lab tech before I became a nurse. We had a set of twins in the NICU that were super early and the mom was still in the OR getting sewed up from the cesarean. I was drawing baby B's blood when mom was wheeled over to baby A's isolate. She was crying and said, "Oh, thank God you're not black. I have been so worried the last 7 months." So newborn babies, especially when they're born early, are very pink, almost red. So even if a baby was part black, their skin isn't necessarily dark yet. But looking at these babies, it was obvious they were going to be black. The shape of the face, the texture of the hair, and baby B that I was working on had an intense Mongolian spot. A few weeks later, my NICU nurse friend told me that the babies were now on a no info status, meaning security alert. Can't give anyone information about them, can't refer to them by name, etc. She said there was a huge fight because the mom's husband, white guy, obviously noticed that the babies were half black and that mom had cheated on him and got pregnant. The real dad, black guy, came in and didn't realize the mom was even married. Those poor babies. I had the opposite happen, sort of. My wife and I are both brown-skinned, dark-haired, half Mexicans, and our moms are both 100% white blondes with blue and green eyes. So we sort of knew it was a crapshoot with our baby, but the nurse who was assisting with delivery had no idea. At one point she gets sort of nervous and calls for help, and another, I guess more senior nurse, came in and nodded and came over to talk to me. I thought there was something wrong with the baby as she comes over and stumbles through some questions. So I was the father and no one else was coming, etc. Then finally she awkwardly asks if either of us happened to be blonde growing up. I said yeah I was, and both the baby's grandparents are blonde as they come, and this wave of relief went over her, and she brought me over to see this blonde as hell crowning baby head. It's funny because he looks just like me if you applied a gringo Instagram filter. We often get awkward questions about his heritage and my wife always hits them with yeah we're not sure if he's mine. It's always funny to see people nod for a moment and then go wait what? If you guys are enjoying this thread, you should watch Lauren Lake's paternity court on TV. My favorite case was one where the female spent almost the entire 25 minutes going over all this proof that the kid was his, using facial similarities, swearing up and down, and even bringing in witness attest that she was of good character and would not cheat, even straight insulting the guy, saying how shitty it is he denies his child and won't grow up, etc. Through all of this, the guy just stood there quietly, not saying a word, not defending himself, nothing. Finally, the judge asks if he has anything to say or would like to plead his case. He motions to the only thing on the desk, a manila folder. Plaintiff takes it to the judge. She opens it, reads for a minute, then dismisses the case in the favor of the guy. Turns out he had been deployed overseas in Afghanistan during the year before, and during the entire pregnancy and birth. He came home after 4 years and was introduced to his 2-year-old child. My brother's friend was in the army and had a shotgun wedding with a woman he had been dating for a few months. She's white American and he's white Hispanic. The baby came out black until the results came in. She was adamant that the baby was his. She even went to the extent of claiming he was getting her depressed and suicidal and was a bad father because he wouldn't claim his child. The results came back and she said the baby was his. And the paternity test revealed that was a lie. Pretty much she thought she was going to stay with him for that army money. My fiance's father is almost certainly not his biological dad. His mom was just a genuinely terrible human being who didn't even try to hide the fact she was cheating. But his dad loved him from the second he was born, and when the mom decided 4 years later she just didn't want the kid anymore, she just gave him to his dad and rode off. Jay's dad ended up getting married, and they tried 4 kids. Before finding out his sperm count was too low to ever father children, they ended up adopting many years later. He sat my fiance down when my fiance was 13 and told him the truth, and that if Jay wanted to test they would, but it was up to him. Jay cried and told him he just wanted him to be his dad, and that was the end of that. Edit: I originally had put real dad instead of biological dad. Changed it when several people pointed out that the man who raised him is most certainly his real dad. I know a girl who was pregnant with her boyfriend's best friend's baby. He found out there was a possibility about a week before she gave birth. I went up to see her once he was born, and he looked just like the friend. There was no question. I broke the news to her boyfriend, and he was absolutely devastated. His parents were heartbroken and super pissed. They had bought the girl everything she needed, including a $500 car seat / stroller set. She refused to give anything back. She started up a relationship with the friend immediately after having their child, and they are still together a decade later. But the kicker for me has always been that the boyfriend and best friend were next door neighbors. She moved into his house after coming home from the hospital. So her ex-boyfriend and his family had to see them basically every day raising this child that they had believed to be his for the entire pregnancy. I can't even imagine. Edit: yes, they did a DNA test right after he was born. The baby was the friend's. Happened to my fiance's mom. His mom is a labor and delivery nurse. One time she had a patient whose parents were present during her stay at the hospital. The staff there have a whiteboard with some general information about the patients, like blood type, time spent in the wing, and like how far along. This information is nameless for HIPAA reasons and instead has a patient's number. So this patient happened to be the only one in the wing at the time. Her father was walking back from the cafeteria at one point and noticed the board. He stopped one of the nurses and asked if the blood type for the patient on the board was correct. He knew his daughter was the only patient there. It was B+. The nurse confirmed it was correct. Turns out he knew his and his wife's blood type. He was O+ and his wife was A. This combination will never yield a B+ baby. He brings his wife out and just points at the board, and this look of shock washes over her. TLDR: father of patient in labor finds out his wife cuckolded him 25 years later by knowing his blood type. Punnett squares. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Goodbye.